This episode mentions suicide and may be triggering for some listeners.
Hey, everybody. Jen Hatmaker here, your host of the For the Love podcast. Welcome to the show. We got a big one today, guys. We've got a big one. We really do. Right now, we are in a series called For the Love of Therapy, which needs no explanation. This is just important. The end. This is important. And so what's important to the community is important to the podcast. And so we knew that we wanted to build a powerful series around mental wellness and therapy and all the ways we get there. So you guys today, oh gosh. I don't even know why I need to introduce her. I don't. But today we have on actor and talk show host, Jada Pinkett Smith. She was actually named one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2021. Wow, that's huge. Obviously a co-host of Red Table Talk, which won a Daytime Emmy. And if you don't know her just by her name alone, I can never list all her movies. Like there's so, Nutty Professor and Bad Moms and Magic Mike XXL and Girls Trip and The Matrix Resurrection. They just go on forever. She's really done it all. Like she really has. She was a lead singer and songwriter for a metal band. Seriously. She published a children's book that went to number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. She's, married to, a pretty famous dude. And so, but she's her own person. And she was her own person way before Will. And that's really what we're talking about today. Like, she's an outrageous talent in her own right, obviously, but she also had a whole life, a childhood and an adolescence that deeply informed who she is and where she's at. And we talk about all that, but I'm just thrilled we have her as part of the series because as you'll hear, therapy and like therapeutic interventions was a huge part of her story. Like, in fact, in her book, which I got to read early, it's where we start. She starts out with sort of her therapeutic wellness practices and then goes back and says, why am I here? And builds up to that point again. But she is wildly honest. And as far as I can tell, didn't seem to hold back a single detail. So in her beautiful book coming out, it's called Worthy. And wait till you see the cover. She really kind of explores her path to accepting her power as a person, as a woman, and her discovery that this strong sense of self and this internal compass is every woman's right and her saving grace. And it's just beautiful. It really is. Just a beautiful story. And also she had amazing things to say about motherhood and what self-love does for our hearts and our souls and what it means for our healing. It was really powerful and really candid. And it was a side of Jada. I told her this at the beginning of the interview. I followed her career pretty closely. I've seen, I think, almost everything she's ever been in. And Red Table, I know her work. And when I read her book, I'm like, holy moly, I did not know that. And I did not know that. And I did not know that. And so if you didn't already, you are going to adore her after you hear this conversation. I'm just delighted to have on the show the wonderful Jada Pinkett. Jada, welcome to the For the Love podcast. I, have been looking forward to meeting you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. It's just a very casual day.
Yes.
Just did laundry and then I'm going to talk to Jada. I obviously didn't need to, but I've already sort of filled my listeners in with just the high level stuff of your life, for sure. But I wonder really quickly before we get into your book, which is marvelous. And I've got things to say. So I'm going to wait for just a second. We'll get there. But before I kind of jump in, I wonder if we can kind of start here, like just as a foundational jumping off point. Would you mind giving us any sort of, I guess, really behind the scenes look at you and your life and who you are, maybe what the world doesn't exactly see? Like, what is it? What's the most important thing about you, and what do you value, and what means the most to you? Because I think that really informs everything that you wrote about and the way in which you told your story, and certainly the way that you're living right now.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that I think that a lot of people think that they know a lot about me, you know, based on like, I've had a very public marriage and I've got very public kids and I've had the red table. And I think that one of the misconceptions is that, you know, because of the red table, people really think that they know my story. And as much as I have talked on the red table, I really haven't been able to share my story, you know, just because there's so much context that I think would have had to have been shared that I feel like the book gives me an opportunity to do. And I think that because I haven't really had that opportunity to share the context of my story and of who I am, it's very difficult to know who I am, actually. You know what I mean? So I think that you know, just kind of trying to put the pieces together of what people might see on the outside, or pieces of my life that are part of other people's lives, you know, and I think that people have kind of decided for themselves who they think that I am, you know, and I totally get that. And I'm not even going to say that I've been really helpful. You know, I have to be honest about that, you know, that I haven't really been helpful in a more honest depiction of who I am, you know?
I do, because I was reading your memoir, which is soon to be released. I realized I have followed you pretty closely. I've consumed almost everything that you've made, certainly the red table. I've paid attention to your life. And as I was reading your book, virtually every page, I was like, I had no idea. I did not know that. I did not know that. I did not know that was what she had been through. I did not know that was her childhood. You're right. And I can understand how those would have been impossible pieces to drop in void of context. You simply can't. You just couldn't. It'd be too jarring. And so before we get into it, I'm curious, like as a fellow writer, how you found the writing process. Obviously, you're a writer. You've been writing poetry your whole life. You're a writer, you're a creator. But writing a book, a memoir in long form like this is a completely different animal. What was it like for? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Both?
Both.
Yeah.
It was, I have to be honest with you. I think, I mean, Jen, it was the most excruciating process, you know, like having to dig up all that stuff, having to relive it, having to recognize aspects of my life that I've made peace with and aspects of my life that I haven't. And having to, in the moment, you know, being forced to make peace with so many things. Because, I mean, it was so many times I was like, bunk this. I don't want to do this anymore. It was just so painful. Yeah. So, yeah.
As I was reading, I thought there had to have been some of these pages where you thought, I'm not going to write this. I'm not going to include this. I'm going to delete this. And you powered through, and you did it with a lot of really impressive memory. I know that's a random thing to say, but your attention to detail when you went back and mined bits and pieces of your story, I was shocked at how much you could remember, like in full fleshed out detail. did you just have a sharp memory? Did some of your people help you reconstruct some of those moments, or was it all
Yeah.
locked in there?
Well, I definitely would have to make a couple of phone calls and be like, okay, you were there with me, exactly. And she's like, oh yeah, my girlfriend be like, yeah, that was it. But no, it was at night. Cause remember we were downtown and and I was like, yeah, that's right. So it's like little things that will spark your memory and just get you right back to that place and time.
You did, and you went there, and I think that you went there with really impressive honesty. I kept feeling drawn to you while I was reading it because you didn't spare transparency, not even in your current life. Even as you talked about what it looked like now, you didn't paint the rosiest picture of really any of it. I mean, even the marriage that all the world just reveres and adores, you and Will, you talked about it in really stark terms, your beginnings, kind of the scrappy, messy parts of it. And I found my reflection in it. I know it's your story. It's your really specific memoir, but the way in which you told it with candor, and you didn't spare the hard parts, I kept thinking, oh, a lot of people are going to resonate with this, no matter really what their story is. I just kept thinking, yeah, that's what it's like to be a woman. Yeah, that's what it's like to be in pain. Yes, that's what marriage is really like behind the curtain. Like, you did it. You really did it. I can only imagine what that was like. What a labor of love. Can you talk about why you decided to do this? Why you decided to write a book?
Yeah, through my journey, it was so difficult finding answers, finding other women who felt comfortable enough to really share the honesty, the raw truth. Like, I need to know there were just times I was like hanging on by a thread of my life. Like, please, before this thread breaks, just give me anything. I know you've been through a lot. Please just, and I just wanted to offer other women breadcrumbs that are on this journey called life. Like, our journeys aren't going to look exactly the same, but there's just some universal challenges that we have just being human, right? And specifically being women. And I just wanted to go, listen, I don't care what's going on Instagram and Facebook. Life is messy. Life is difficult. It's challenging. We're all trying to figure this out. And I'm just going to show you little things along the way that I figured out. And I'm hoping that in your challenges, it might just give you a little oxygen. I'm not saying it'll give you the answer, right? But maybe it'll give you a little oxygen to just help you get to your next gate, to get to your next door, And that's all I wanted, because I struggled for a long time, and I'm like, man, if I can just ease someone else's struggle just a bit, that to me just makes my heart smile, because it's hard out here.
It is. And you start, the opening sort of lines to the song that you've written here is about this sense of being unworthy, unlovable. Of course, the title's worthy, which is familiar. It's just so familiar, the way in which you write it. And so, I mean, everyone's going to have to read it, and it's too much to encapsulate in one, but just however you can, from the 30,000-foot view, I wonder if you can kind of summarize the earliest influences on your sense of worth, for better and for worse, because some voices were strong and good and some were not. And so I wonder if you could just sort of say, look, this is what I'm including. This is the kind of story you're getting here, from those early voices. And those are strong, those early voices. They're formative.
Yeah, very. Mm-hmm. I think for me, look, I'm the, as one of my chapters is called, the blessed child of two addicts, right? And so I was born to very young parents who were, both addicts and, whose priority was their addiction, right? And, as a child, that is your first reflection. If your mirror is your father and your mother. And so to feel as though that I wasn't a priority at that time to either one of them really sent a message of, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for my father to want to father me, and I'm not good enough to be my mother's priority, right? But then to counter that, I had my grandmother Marion, and I was the apple of her eye. You know what I mean? So she was there to remind me that I was worthy, and that, she gave me every bit of knowledge and love and attention that, she could muster. Right. And I'm so glad that I had my grandmother who I laid these train tracks down. So the many times that I got off track, I knew how to find my way back to at least keep going forward. Right. But I could never, I really had to reconcile that early messaging from my origin, from my parents. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And then you told the truth sort of about your adolescence, your teen years in Baltimore, gritty. Um, and it was fascinating to read. I mean, you were just, of course, I read it as a mom because I've got a bunch of young adults and teenagers. So I'm like, God, like you were just in danger so many times. And it's just escaped by like the skin of your teeth so many times.
And those were just like, I just picked a couple of incidents. Yeah. I was like, yeah, we lived in a war zone. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. And you were just surviving in all the ways that were available to you. And it's funny to think of you, this tiny little scrappy thing out there in these dangerous worlds of just drugs and violence and fear. And so I think it's so funny. I got tickled when I was reading. It's not a very long part of your book at all. It's just a few pages. But when you talk about leaving Baltimore and then going to UNC, to the School of the Arts, really for just 1 year, my brain could not relocate you in such a different environment. I mean, deep South, like the deep South, UNC, I cracked up. I'm like, what was that year like? I'd love to hear you talk about that because that year, in some ways, was important to you. And really, like, it sort of didn't pivot for you, even though it wasn't that long in your story. I just thought, that was an important stop along the way. I'd love to hear you talk about it a little bit more.
Let me tell you, even though I'm so lucky, first of all. Yes, my mother was deep in her addiction, but I'm going to tell you, she showed up at some of the most pivotal times, right? Yeah. And so when she found out what was going on with me in Baltimore, she got me the hell up out of there.
She did. She kicked your ass all the way down there.
she did. I was not planning on going. And I mean, all the way to the morning when she was like, get your bags and get your ass in this car, right? She drove me down there, right? And, up until then, I'm still thinking like, I'm going to get out of this, but I got to North Carolina School for the Arts. And I have to be honest, it probably saved my life. I was either going to be dead or in jail, no doubt about it. Right. And I just got focused because I'm in the Deep South. There ain't really much to do. Right. And at least, I wasn't really willing to get in the streets there. And once I got on campus and just really got immersed in in my art again, and got focused, like, oh yeah, that's right, I can do this. I do have talent. Okay, like I can make something out of this, you know? And I just got really focused because I didn't have much else to really pay attention to. So I really got focused, and it was a really crucial year for me. Yeah, and I got really detached. And I'm going to tell you something else. I really started to realize how much stress I had been under, living had been living, you know, and all of the chaos. Now, it will take me years to really detach myself from chaos, because chaos became normal for me. But at least I was able to see, once I got to North Carolina, how chaotic my life had been and how I could make different choices so that I didn't have to be immersed in so much chaos. Now, as life goes on, I had to, you know, keep deepening that process of detaching from chaos, but at least I got to see, you know, in that moment that you don't need the chaos of the streets, you know?
You're right. That's a multifaceted decision you make a bunch of times before it sticks. But it was, you know, at that point you went out to LA to make it go. And you're a baby. You're 18 or 19 years old. Out to LA. It was great to read the way that you wrote just about the levels of Black talent in LA. Like, I put my brain back. I'm like, oh yeah, late 80s and 90s. What a time. Like, what a time when so many Black creators and hosts and performers and actors and writers were just on the rise everywhere. It was really a marvelous time. I'm curious, who were you watching? Who were you emulating? Who was making you feel really excited as an actor, as someone who was really at the beginning of your own craft?
I'd have to say Debbie Allen, Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because Debbie Allen, there's nothing that Debbie couldn't do. Still to this day. She directs, she writes, she acts, she sings, she dances, like she choreographs. I was like, I want to do that, right? So she was like my blueprint. Then I'll never forget when Glory came out. Oh, Denzel's performance in Glory.
Yeah,
I was still in school. Yes. And I was like, I wanna do that. I want to make people feel in the seats how he's making me feel right now. I am with him in this moment. You know, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to LA, you know? And so I called my mother and I said, you got two choices. I can go to law school, I can go to LA. And she was like, well, we're going to LA.
She was right.
Yeah.
And obviously it's fun to hear you talk about Debbie, because I chuckled out loud. I didn't know that you'd passed on Blossom. You'd have played a 13-year-old or whatever it was, passed on Blossom, which was a huge hit. I mean, it was like that. It was not nothing. And then 2 weeks later, A Different World.
Yes. I just knew. I was like, I can't play. I mean, I'm 19 years old. You know, I'm 19. I was like, I can't play a 12-year-old. Like, this is not going to work for me. And I'll never forget my agent. I just love her to death. Nancy Rainford, she just trusted me. And I was like, Nancy, I feel like something's coming. And 2 weeks later, freaking A Different World falls into
Can't believe it.
Right?
And then it meant so much to you for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is Debbie. For Pete's sake. I mean, who turned into, of course, a mentor.
Yes.
And a teacher, like a mother figure, really.
Absolutely.
To
this
day. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can call her if you need her, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously, I mean, your really special friendship with Tupac features prominently in your book. And it was really interesting to read because it felt really kind of fresh, and it felt kind of pure because we know you as you are now. And of course, we knew Tupac once he was in the public eye. And, there's never been anyone like him. And he was innovative and original and so interesting and captivating. But when you write about him, of course, you were just kids who were just friends. You wrote about it in such a human way, the both of you, who were just coming of age. And I kind of remember this moment where he had a hard go of it. And you talked about walking into his apartment and just the conditions that he was living in, that it was just almost hard to even be in the room. And, you wrote that part of your story and his in a really human way that was kind of lovely to read, about not just your friendship, but him. Obviously, having been taken way, 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 way too early. How did you find that part of the writing process? Because that was such a special relationship, and he was such a special person. And that kind of friendship was, of course, rare air with someone of that notoriety, and that level of talent. But he was just your dude. Like, sure.
He was my brother,
Yes, exactly.
And I felt like I finally, I'll be honest with you. I really had to make some decisions on whether I was going to talk about him as extensively as I did, because I've never done that. You know what I mean? And I felt like he was such an imperative and important part of so much of my journey in my early years, from high school to my early years into Hollywood, and we had such a special dynamic. And I really wanted people also to get off of this thing of there was this romantic thing between Pac and I. And I wanted to only he or I could write about what our relationship was, and he's not here to do it, And so I was like, well, okay, I feel called to do it, and I think it's okay, because I really want people to, and in hopes that people could have a friendship like the one that I had, with Pac. And of course, it wasn't easy. It had its challenges, We're both Spitfires, so we definitely clashed a lot, but we had a lot of love for each other. But it was really difficult. It was very challenging having to go back and think about, everything that we'd been through. And, and his loss. I mean, it will run up on me like I just lost him yesterday. I tell people all the time that you don't get over, loss. What you do is you just learn how to cope, And so, and I think I realized that I didn't really give myself the proper opportunity to mourn for Pac, because I just never really knew how to mourn. I'm still learning how to mourn. I'm still learning how to mourn loss, whether it's loss of people, loss of dreams of my life, because I'm so used to white knuckling everything. All right, that happened. Let's keep it moving. Keep it going. I don't give myself time to feel things, And so I really did a lot of mourning. And when I said to you earlier, going through the process and realizing oh, I thought I had made peace with this. It's oh, I haven't, so I had to be with stuff, feel it, allow it, give myself grace with it, and And that was one of the biggest parts of this book, was just learning how to give myself permission to feel. You know,
not good at that, are we? I mean, we're really not. No one ever taught us that. That was never really modeled. That wasn't sort of the ethos of our generation at all. That's adult learning for me.
Yeah, me too. Like,
right. I learned that in the therapist chair. That's where I learned that.
Exactly.
I paid for that knowledge.
Exactly. And I'm still like, I still have to remind myself, it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. Yes, he's been gone 26 years. Guess what? It still hurts. Okay, cry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know? And, you know, I'm with you.
It was beautiful.
Everyday process. Yeah.
That resisting our pain makes it so much worse. That's really where the pain resides at its like white hot temperature, is in the resistance. Letting it be what it is, sad, horrible, traumatic, devastating, and just live in our bodies like that until it passes through. It's a practice. And it takes a lot of work.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes, even often, we're faced with tough choices. All of us, really. Sometimes the path forward isn't that clear at all. So, I mean, really, show me a human person who hasn't dealt with this. I mean, decisions around, you name it, career, relationships, family, so many things. And I've been there, of course. And therapy helped me. It helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate everything life throws at you. So you can move forward, not just with confidence, but even like excitement. I've learned that trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. Like the more you practice it, the easier it gets. And so if you're thinking of trying therapy, just think about trying BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's convenient and flexible, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a really brief questionnaire and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you need to. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/forthelove today and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forthelove.
I'm curious. This book is so much about what you've learned thus far and all the measures that you have taken to heal, to recover, and to be whole and healthy. And I love so very much that all of that is internal. It's an inside job. You did not externalize that. That is nobody's job to do for us. For if they would just act better, we would have a better life. You really put the impetus on us. The responsibility is ours, no matter what's been handed us. That's not to say our lives haven't been traumatic and devastating and abusive and all the things that life can be, but it's still it's in our hands what we're going to do with it. And so I've got a couple of questions out of that. I'd love to know what you would name as some of the labels or maybe the narratives, either way, that were placed on you at any point in your life, whether it was when you were young or when you were young adult, or even last year. And then what it has been like to shed those, or to renovate those into something that's more true and more whole.
Yeah. You know, I think the biggest thing that I've learned from this, you know, after the whole Oscar situation, and even before that, even with, you know, the false narrative that I allowed at the red table around the entanglement and what have you, going through that gauntlet of so much judgment in the most like, you know, I realized like, oh, it's not other people's judgment that's the problem. It's how you judge yourself. Right. And so I realized that through that whole gauntlet of like curing a certain level of self-judgment, how when you know who you are and you are in the process of healing your self-judgment, you realize that any judgment that anybody's got on you is really a reflection of where they are sitting within themselves. It has nothing to do with you, right? But and I had to be in a real hot seat to learn that thoroughly, that it's not just theory, because we hear that all the time. How somebody feels about you is not your business, what I went through the last 5 years really helped me put that theory into practice and to really understand the truth of it. And it is so freeing when you realize what people think about you is so much more of a reflection of how they think about themselves. And when you're in the process of dealing with your own self-judgment, and then you can understand how other people are judging themselves through judging you, I have learned to have compassion for people's judgment on me. Right? It's like,
that's powerful.
It's like, I get it. I get it.
Wow.
I understand. And I take no offense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's high level. That's a high level way to live.
Yeah.
To not just adopt somebody else's opinion, but not even to take it personally.
Yeah.
That's when you're free.
That's when you're free.
Yeah.
And that's when you really start to understand the human condition. And when you really start to see people's fears and you really start to see people's pain, right? And that's why people want to strike at you. And that's why people want to, spew whatever they can your way, because of how they've been hurt, how they've hurt themselves, how they've been hurt from others, judgment, they judge, and you just realize, wow, it's okay. I get it. And I wish you well.
It's true. I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
I've given it and I've received it.
And that's the thing.
You're right.
And that's it. And because I've given it, right? I know what that is. And when I'm receiving it, I was like, oh, and then being in the healing space of it and being able to understand both the worlds of giving it and receiving it. And then you start to understand the dynamic of it all. And then you start to see the code,
It's so good. That's a really powerful takeaway. And certainly a way to live free on this earth in a way that allows us to remain generous of spirit and also not broken down all the time. Because truly what you also walk away from is going, okay, they said this about me. They think this about me even. This is how does that change my real life? Like I'm still loved. I still have my people. I still care about what I care about. Like you realize you're all right.
Yeah,
you're all right. Like that really doesn't have power over you.
Right. And furthermore, that's not who I am.
That is the core. That doesn't get in. It doesn't make its way in.
No, it doesn't make its way in because it's like, that's not me.
Probably some of the most important, I think, parts of your memoir that you have included, which is where people everywhere are going to feel seen, so understood, so much less alone, is your really candid way of talking about complex trauma and PTSD and panic attacks and suicidal ideation and whatever medication we need to sort of stabilize the turbulence so that all of that is so important. And I'm grateful that you didn't leave it out. And I can see how you might have, and nobody would have faulted you for it. You could have said, that's too private, that I'm just going to keep that one, those bits tucked away, but you didn't. And those are such ubiquitous ways of hurting and suffering in the world. They're common. They're common. It's just not enough people are talking about it. And so I'd love to hear you talk about a couple of things. Your decision to talk so frankly about just your own mental health, your own journey to understand your own mental health. And then I'd love to hear you talk about some of the really, no, I'm going to put a pin in that. I'll come back to that one. Let me hear you answer that question first, because I really want to spend some time on the next question.
I thought it was really important to talk about my mental health because I know how many people are struggling, and whether like some of us struggle in more extreme ways, and some of us are, not struggling in such extreme ways, but still struggling, right? And I know what kind of oxygen that would have given me if I had been able to hear someone talk about it in an honest way. I wouldn't think that I was crazy, or I wouldn't have to feel so ashamed. I felt so much shame for feeling the way that I did, having the things that I had, because that is like, well, what are you upset about? Right? And mental health doesn't have anything to do with that. Right. And I need people, and that was one of the reasons why I thought I wanted to share that. Like, here is a person who seemingly had it all, who was looking for cliffs to drive off of. And it was a serious, dire situation that nothing material could help me with. So all of this, when people are looking at people like, oh, you've got the greatest life, and it's like, stop. That is not what this is about. So that's why I felt like it was really important. And I wanted people to feel seen, because I know so many people from all different kinds of walks of life that are dealing with that struggle.
Totally.
And so that's why it was really important for me.
I agree. And I feel really hopeful that more and more people are being really honest about what this looks like in a real life, however privileged or not. As you said, it has no bearing. It doesn't matter. It's indiscriminate. And so, because what that means, that's going to save people's lives. That's what it means. Like, really, down at the brass bottom, like, it will save people's lives who feel empowered to get help, to say, I need somebody with me in this. Whatever it is, whatever their steps are toward health, that is kind of life-saving work. And so I think the second part of that question that I really wanted to hear you talk about, and of course, and you mentioned this right out of the gate in the book. You're not trying to be a doctor. You're not making a prescription. You're not saying this is a template for wellness. That's not your deal. You're telling your story and your journey, and that's exactly what it is, tailored to you. But in your story, it matters to you.
I was chatting with my book clubbers just the other day in one of our Zoom book talks about the fact that we've been reading together, you guys, for more than 4 years. It's crazy. We have read tons of incredible, impactful, thought-provoking, fun books during that time in the Jen Hatmaker Book Club. And this upcoming season is going to be amazing too. I actually can't wait to get into the lineup of books we have planned. And if you weren't reading with us, let's fix that. When you're a book club member, not only do you get a book box delivered to your doorstep every month with the book, of course, and a special gift and love notes for me. It's so fun. But we also have live chats on Zoom in our private group. Plus, it's really the best corner of the internet over there. I mean, like, sure, we talk about books every month, of course, but also about life. People are making lifelong friends there and finding connection with others right in their towns, getting together with their local chapters. It's amazing. when you're in book club, you guys get a whole bunch of digital resources like discussion guides and custom content and music playlists from our authors, which are our favorite. So just head over to jenhatmakerbookclub.com to sign up. Start reading with us and making book friends. So you guys, we want you in. It's jenhatmakerbookclub.com.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the most profound healing practices in whatever form or shape that you discovered, because you're a spiritual seeker, which you talked about a lot as well. And so that made you open to all kinds of truth and wholeness and help and healing. And so if you were to say, these were the primary levers that I pulled that made the biggest impact on my wellness, I wonder if you could talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So I would say the primary levers was, number one, I would say, and I definitely would say that this particular medicine is not for everybody, right? But when I discovered ayahuasca, and it was a hellish time, those 4 nights when I was really at the edge of like, something's got to give or I'm out of here. I had my plan. I was out of here. Right. And it just so happened, by the grace of God, my son Jaden was talking to 2 of his very close friends, Moises and Mateo, about their dad who had just gone to Peru and done ayahuasca. And he was like, Mom, you got to come in here and you got to listen, just off the cuff. And I went and I listened, and I'm like, oh, wow. Like, it's your dad in town. And so he came, he talked to me about it. And I was like, I got to do this. I could just see in him this incredible shift. And within a month, a door opened for me to go have a ceremony. And I went, and from that, it was 2 hellish nights. I have never had a suicidal thought again. Now, with that, I would also say the second lever was trauma therapy. Jen, I was so unaware. Even today, it's difficult for me to look at my life and say that I've suffered trauma. Okay? It is so, like, for me to accept, like, oh, okay. Oh, I guess, yeah, that's how I could have got PTSD. Right? And it's like, because I've heard so many other stories, and that have been, and so many other lives that have been far more traumatic, right? I'm like, no, that's how you get PTSD. I'm one of the lucky ones, and so really having to I was doing an interview with someone else the other day, and they were like, Jada, you went through I can't believe you went through all that you were just a kid. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, but it wasn't that bad. Right. And so I didn't realize how much trauma I had. And even as I'm talking to you, I'm saying it to you because I know it theoretically, but I'm still in the process of believing it.
Yeah. So trauma therapy helped you see it for what it was,
yes.
Or is helping you. It's probably a process.
It's helping me see it. What, you know what I mean? For me to really see it.
Yeah.
And just see it.
Oh. I mean, I could just start picking stories out of your book and be like, guy having a gun put to your head, that would have been enough.
Yeah. Right.
That alone could have qualified for some PTSD. That's just one. That was one paragraph.
That was one paragraph.
So, that is something I feel also hopeful for this younger and next generation. We just know so much more about trauma now than we even knew 20 years ago. I mean, when I think about the veterans who came home from war and nobody could figure out why they lost the capacity to function and spiraled into addiction and mental illness. Nobody even, what's happened to them? Why can't they be like they were before? Just, we haven't known enough about trauma. And so I'm so grateful for all the practitioners and health advocates who dove in here. And now we get to heal from trauma.
And I think that's part of like stuck in that old school frame of mind, like trauma with war and with like, you know what I mean? Like how trauma, how in our generation relating to trauma or what trauma was is not, you know,
you're like, right. It's not just a war trench.
Yeah. You know, it was like, no, we were just living life. Like this is just life. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. But it goes back to what you said earlier when you went to UNC and went, oh, wait a minute. I was living inside an extraordinary level of chaos every day until you were out of it. Could you even really see it with any clarity? I think that's really wonderful. Okay. Here's the last question I want to ask you. It's a big loaded one and you might have more than one answer. So you could pick one, but what are you hoping that your reader walks away with when they read your book? Because it's your story. You've written it. You've put it together. You've created it. But then when you hand it to the reader, it's theirs. And it's theirs now to interact with from their vantage point, from their worldview, from their experiences. And it almost takes on a life of its own. It's very interesting alchemy when an author hands their book to their reader. And so what are you hoping that your reader closes that very last page and walks away with?
To be okay with embracing their journey through and through. You know, it's like, you know, you said something earlier, like, yeah, it's my journey, but you saw so much of your own, you know, and I think that we as women aren't always given, we're not given permission to accept, you know, our journeys, the beauty, the messy, ugly, dirty, gritty of it all. And without that, you can't be whole. Without that, you cannot really have the knowledge and wisdom needed to walk this earth, you know, sane and peacefully, right? And I'm hoping that people will look at that, at my journey and see their journey and understand that it's okay to embrace it all.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I'm excited for the world to have it. And I am really thankful for your willingness to labor this one into existence. And it really is. It's like a baby being born. And it's beautiful. And you're a really masterful storyteller. As I was reading, I was like, I need to go and do something else. And then I'm like, well, just one more chapter. What happens next? It's like, your story is fascinating. And wow. You tell it with so much color and life and truth. And so it's exciting. I can't wait for everybody else to read it. Thank you for being on the show today. Just delighted to meet you and to know that you are just every bit as good as I thought. I love that. I'm so happy when that happens.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. You
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Jada. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. Powerful conversation. And we really just barely scratched the surface. We'll put links everywhere for you. In fact, if you want to go to jenhatmaker.com, under the podcast tab, I'll have this whole episode, which is a great one to share, plus the entire therapy series, of course. And then I'll put links to all of Jada's stuff, her work, her book, everything you'd ever want in one spot for you. We have so much in this series that is just powerful and good and useful and helpful and hopeful. I honestly can't believe we haven't done a whole therapy series yet. We've, of course, sprinkled tons of therapists in all of our previous episodes, but I really love just drilling down into this particular space. And I hope that you do too. And I hope it serves you well. And if you haven't already subscribed to the show, do it. Also, gosh, if you want to watch this, who doesn't want to look at Jada Pinkett Smith? We, in addition to the audio recording, we always video every episode, which is over on my YouTube channel, which you can just search up. So if you want to watch this conversation, you can pop over there. Otherwise, we're glad to be in your AirPods. All right, you guys, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.